Welcome. Thank you guys for coming today. So I just want to talk about the building blocks of UI design. I don't know if you've ever been interested to do design, if you're interested to do design, I wanted to kind of show you some simple ways to help make your designs look a little bit better. So let's get started. First off, I'm Travis Arnold. I'm designer developer. Chan already mentioned that. I work here at Planning Center. It's the best place ever, so whenever we're hiring, apply, because it's friggin' fun. So I work with developers all the time, and sometimes I get questions about how they can design or get started in design. This kind of sparked my talk to put together some just small guidelines to help you make better designs. So hopefully by the end of this talk that you'll have the proper knowledge to start designing. So what is design? Well, if we look at Google, design is purpose, planning, or intention that exists or is thought to exist behind an action, fact, or material object. In our case, we have a digital object we're working with when we're working in UI design. So what does this mean? When you're designing anything, there should be a purpose behind your designs. From the big picture down to the smallest details. You always want a reason for why you're designing. You don't want to just start throwing things on a page and then for no reason. We got to remember we're designing for users here, and there should be an intent behind that design. A thing to remember is that design includes the experience and not just putting elements on a page. So tonight we'll be discussing some simple principles that can bring harmony as well as hierarchy to your designs. So let's get started. So some simple things you can pull from almost every design is especially UI design, is grid, type, and color. Design can be very complex, but I think you can pull these three simple things out of it. Or not simple, they can get pretty complicated. So I think, let's unpack these a little bit and see how they can benefit us in our design process. So we've talked about grid a little bit tonight, which is kind of cool. I'm glad all of our talks kind of complement each other a little bit. So I just want to go, over theory of a grid and why we want to use a grid. So it's actually, a grid's pretty simple. As you can see, it's just rows and columns, which John explained very well, and how we can actually start almost using that in our web browsers. So if you think, I don't know if you've ever has anyone ever here used Bootstrap? Awesome. So if you've used Bootstrap, you know that it comes with a grid. And so all a grid really does is help us place elements in a certain order, pretty much. If you look here, we've got spaces going on between these columns. And what that's referred to as a gutter. I guess in CSS, it's referred to as a gap, which I thought was a little weird when I heard John talk about it. So a gap, or gutters or gaps, just give breathing room to your columns, and will help define your columns a little bit better, so it's not all smushed together. So I found this online, and I thought it was a really great example of a grid and how you can use it with typography. One thing a couple things a grid provides us is it stops things floating aimlessly. It frames our important objects. It helps guide you to where to place things, which in turn guides your users on where things are placed, kind of thing. So they can get used to the consistency of things and knowing that they're going to be in this rigid grid. If you look along here, you see those horizontal lines. That's known as vertical rhythm. I'm not going to get into that really, not really at all, honestly, just because on the web, it's kind of inherently impossible to do vertical rhythm. This is more of when we're in the posters and stuff and not UI design. We were able to get away with this kind of stuff, but the web, when you introduce something like an image, it can throw your whole vertical rhythm off. So it's really hard to try to maintain a vertical rhythm. And I honestly don't think it's that important. I think if you can master getting just columns down and that and a great typography, you'll do very well, which leads me into my next topic on type. So grid systems don't be too intimidated by them. All it really is columns, and it will allow you to place elements in an orderly manner and provide consistency. So I don't know, does anyone remember the Oscars recently? And what happened? Does anyone remember what happened? Exactly. So why was that? the wrong winner was announced, right? And why was this? Probably, honestly, just poor design, but probably just poor type choices even. So if we look at the one on the left, you could see like the logo is pretty big. Like, why is that logo so big? We're already at the Oscars. I don't think that person needs to know that they're at the Oscars, right? Like, that probably shouldn't even be there. And then if you see, there's no hierarchy on the left side. Like, it's all kind of flat. And then at the bottom, you can see that it says Best Actress. Like, how was that person supposed to realize that they might have been reading the wrong card? So yeah, I pulled this off of Google. That was someone designer's alteration on it. Like, maybe they would have realized that was the wrong one. Yeah, I just want to know if this was, oh shoot, if that's what Steve Harvey was looking like. Let's see if I get it. Yeah, I don't know. If you remember him with Miss America, or Miss Universe, he did a similar thing. So I'm sure he was laughing at that. So what is, I wanted to get a little bit more into type now. So what is type? Type can be referred in different ways. So you have typefaces and fonts. I don't know if you've heard that before. I think it gets a little mushed a lot of the times, but I think an easy way to remember what a typeface is it's just a collection of fonts. And I heard a really good analogy recently that said, think of a typeface as a CD or an album, and the fonts as the tracks of that album, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, here you can see this is Google's Roboto font. And this is kind of just showing the array of fonts that they have in their typeface. So Roboto would be referred to as the typeface. When you're using type, I would suggest, if you can, to stick to system fonts. This will give the best user experience because we're sticking to the system. So we want the familiarity with what they're used to. So say if you're on Android or on iOS. So on iOS, we would use San Francisco, and on Android, we would use Roboto. We don't want to flash our brand too much in UI design because we're trying to get our users to do a task usually. You could save that kind of stuff for marketing. Just remember function over form. As long as it's clear, there's a clear path for your users to take, that's probably the best route you want to go. If you still have a really strong reason for this, though, then of course do so. Like, I think just don't do it aimlessly and be like, oh yeah, no, like we want to do these cool fonts here, and then it kind of ruins the whole experience, and your users can't fill out a form or something because they're distracted by this fancy-looking font. But yeah, just remember these are all just guidelines, so they're not. Don't be too strict, I guess. Yeah, so if you can see here, I think this is something I've recently been studying, I guess, and like found out about. So there's this thing called type scales that you can, not even type scales, you can just create a scale of values. And pretty much what it is, as I guess a simple example would be, is you can use powers of numbers. So if we think if the power of 1 is going to be 1 times 1 is 1, right? So we just have 1 all the way across as far as we go down. So if we use 2, for instance, and we do power of 2s, we'd go, what's 2 times 2? It's 4. What's 4 times 2? It's 8. 8 times 2 is 16, and we keep going. And then we can start building a scale off these ratios. And it's really cool. So you get actual meaning behind your type. You could totally do this and just start picking out a big font to create, to back up a little bit. The reason we'd want to do this is to create hierarchy for our designs. And what hierarchy will allow is to guide our users down a path. So think of a blog post, for instance. Like, you'd want to see the title first, right? So we'd probably want to use a little bit bigger font. And then maybe you'd want the date to be a little bit more subtle, so you put that in a little bit smaller font. And then finally, you have your body copy that you want to the user to actually read. So using a bigger font, it's going to grab their attention with that title first, right? And then they can start digging down into that content. So we're just trying to think of guiding your users this whole time as when you're placing things on a grid and using type and all these things. I suggest never to use more than 6 different sizes of type to convey your hierarchy. I think a good example of this is the web. If you look, we get header tags, which are 1 through 6. Actually, if you look at the web and you don't add any styling to it, we kind of get a similar effect. And you put your header tags on the page, you can get pretty good design by default. It's not the best, but it's still readable and usable. Yeah. So if you use typography to give clear hierarchy and a sense of structure on a page. And to bring even more hierarchy, we can use color, which I want to get into next. Oh, sorry. If you'll notice, or I guess on the next slide, I have that scale at the bottom. I thought it'd be kind of cool, so I used the scale on this whole project. So I kind of highlighted each value I used within the design of each slide. Just kind of show you how you can use a scale to help you make better design decisions. So what's the benefit of color? Like, why would we want to use color? Well, color can provide hierarchy, it can provide contrast, and it could even provide guidance for our users. Color can invoke emotion and actually has psychological correlations. So if you think about a stoplight, for instance, you come up to a stoplight, if it's red, you're gonna stop, right? Or hopefully, it's signaling you to stop. When it's yellow, it's warning you to stop, and when it's green, you can go. So you can think of color in that way, I guess, as a little trick. I don't know. When you're designing your UI. So like in a success state, right, it's going to be green. So just remember when you're using color what emotion you want to invoke for your users. But also be careful though, because if you're doing any international work, be sure to do your homework. 'Cause if there's something like, if you're designing for like a Chinese website, they see red as a sign of good fortune and joy. So you might, if you show an error state in red, they might be like, oh, well, what? This is a good thing, right? So just be sure to do your homework and whatever you're designing for. I really love this quote from an article that I read recently. It's about the links there. I created these little short URL links for you guys. But yeah, this is if you want to learn anything about color, I think this is probably like the best framework, I guess, to learn color. And it's not really, he kind of dogs on color theory and like all this stuff about, yeah, like, cause you can get in like monochromatic color schemes and you can get really deep with it. But yeah, he kind of gives an example of like what apps look like, and how you can, kind of mimic that almost. So yeah, I just love this quote, like the fundamental skill of coloring interface designs is being able to modify one base color into many different variations. So how can we do that? If you look at Facebook, this is exactly what they're doing in their app. They have maybe some like white and blacks going on, and then they have their primary color and just shades and tints off of that color. What a shade is adding black to a color, and a tint is adding white to a color. So the more white you add, the lighter it's going to get. The more black you add, the darker it's going to get. Which brings me to my next thing, using black in designs. You never want to use, I mean, you don't, not never want to use, I think just with intention, use 100% black. If you look at the real world, nothing is ever truly 100% black. So if we can dim it down a little bit, we can create a more natural experience for our designs. So yeah, I heard that once and I've always used it. And it does, I think once you use it, you realize like, oh yeah, that does, it feels just like a little bit better when you don't use a pure black. But maybe you want to use a pure black and invoke whatever emotion with that. So yeah, just designing with intention really is what you want to do. And don't overthink it too much. We can get away with a lot by just using a primary color and variations of black and white. So here I just wanted to show you a little thing that I made taking all these things into account. It's using the scale here. This could be just like a blog X or something. And yeah, just the power of a scale and how it can help you create some nice typography like pretty easily. Like once you've built these values, you can use them all throughout your design, and it speeds up your design process and allows you to create good designs at the same time, which is really cool. We're just using the power of math, right? Like nature or something. Yeah, so we can quickly build out our UIs this way and start focusing more on the user experience of it rather than these values that are there. Yeah, if you also notice, I used the tints and shades from the previous little color scale thing that I had in here. So yeah, I'm not using a pure black there. It's just a really dark orange. So yeah. Yeah, here's some resources that I pulled from to build this talk. Some resources that I really like. We use 8-point grid here, so going back to the powers of 2s, that's if you take 8 times 2, 16, that's what an 8-point grid would be. I'd say I highly suggest reading about it. It's really helped in our design process here. And remember, you can find plenty of UI kits online for free. So I highly suggest going grabbing one of those and kind of deconstructing it and playing around with it. See if you can find a rhythm to it. See if you can find any of these principles that are in there, and then try and recreate it. Maybe like try to just even straight up copy like Facebook or something. Don't go like try to use that in your app, but I think by copying and just looking at how people do things, you can start to see the patterns that they've used in their designs. Sometimes there's not a pattern, and that's kind of interesting. If you look at Snapchat, for instance, they kind of went against all these like UI best practices, and it worked really great. So I think once you feel comfortable enough, you can totally break these rules and start exploring different territories. I like to think the hardest part about design is that it's subjective. We're scientists, so form a hypothesis and go and test that, and see if it works with their users. Honestly, we don't know until we get it in front of someone and see if it actually works or not. So just go have fun with it. Don't stress it too much. I think design can be really fun, and I think especially talking to a bunch of developers, I guess. I don't know, is there any designers out here? Yeah! I think even just having a small understanding of design might help pair that design development gap that there seems to be, I guess, in our industry. Thank you. Appreciate it.